Hello, 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 hello. It is 7 o'clock on Wednesday, and you guys know what that is. That is Tea Talks. So, Tea Talks is our trauma education and advocacy live that I do every Wednesday. So, I am just going to give a couple minute grace period, a 3-minute grace period for you all to join. I missed you guys last week. I was actually celebrating my mom's birthday, so I was not able to join last week. But we're doing Perfectionism Part 2. We were talking about how perfectionism is a coping mechanism for trauma. So we're going to talk about what that is. I'm going to do a recap of what we talked about a couple weeks ago, and then we're going to kind of go over some ways that we can kind of combat that. What does it mean to be perfect anyway? So we're going to give a couple more minutes for people to join, and I'm going to get everything together. We are still in the month of March, so my cup of the month is still the cup, this black mug here with the bookcases on it, surrounded with the books. So that is my cup of the month. Next week we will have a different mug. I was gifted 2 additional mugs, so I can't wait to share them with you guys. Please remember to like and share this broadcast. This is Tea Talks, your #1 trauma education and advocacy podcast in the nation. We're going to talk about those things that have impacted us and how it has affected the way that we respond today. So we're going to talk about what it means to be perfect. What does perfectionism look like, and how we can get through it? Because a lot of times what we learn is that trauma actually comes out as a behavior. None of us are wearing trauma on our foreheads or wearing the t-shirt that said I was traumatized or I've experienced some things. So we're going to kind of look at those behaviors and those things that you may take a look back and say, hey, maybe, just maybe, that affected me because something that happened to me in the past. Hi, Yolanda, how are you? Hi, Mom, how are you? Please like and share. Please tag someone in this video. We're going to be talking about perfectionism on this evening. So welcome to Tea Talks. I am Jackson-Birks, and I am your certified trauma support specialist. And Tea Talks actually stands for Trauma Education and Advocacy. So we come on here and we talk about things that have affected us and how we respond. Hi, Tiara, how are you? Thank you for joining me on this evening. Please remember to tag someone, like and share this broadcast. We want to make sure that we are finding out how we can be better, how we can get better, how we can be whole, how we can overcome those things that have affected us and live a more satisfying life, how we can grab that one piece of us that is just off kilter, and we can reclaim our life. Because as we know, trauma does not give you anything, it takes everything. And so we want to get our pieces back together. We want to be a whole picture. We want to be whole, just the way that we were designed to be. So as I said, today we're going to be talking about perfectionism. So again, welcome to Tea Talks. This is my mug of the month. We are still in March, and so this is a black mug with bookcases, if you guys can see that, and it's filled with books on both sides. So I was gifted 2 additional mugs over this past month, so I am excited to share them with you starting next week. So we're going to go ahead and get started and talk about perfectionism. What does it mean to be perfect anyway? Right? There's a difference between wanting things to be together and then looking at things as being perfect. Being perfect is all about your perception, because none of us in this world are perfect. We weren't made to be perfect. We were made to have those things that are not quite perfect in us so that the world will be interesting, right? But perfectionism has a tendency, it involves you setting those high standards that cannot be met or are only met with great difficulty. Perfectionism means you're setting standards that are so high for yourself and others that they cannot be met, or it takes a lot in order to meet them. Right? There's a difficulty that is attached to that. Perfectionism tends to believe that anything short of perfection is horrible. I put up a post a couple weeks ago, and it says, you don't have to be perfect to be powerful. And I just absolutely love that quote. You do not have to be perfect to be powerful. So most people believe that it's important to do your best. And I agree 100%. It is important to do your best. But when your best is turning into a cause of stress or a cause of tension for you, or you can't rest, or you're always feeling anxious, then is that your best, or are we, again, setting those standards too high in order to be met? You know, people who have perfectionism tendencies, they literally, if there is one mistake that's made, they feel like they're a failure, a complete failure. And we're going to talk about how we get through that, because you're not a failure. Mistakes happen. The key is to learn from those things. But again, perfectionists think that they should never make a mistake, ever, ever, ever. And making a mistake means that I failed. Okay? And it makes it, when we do that, it makes it scary for us to make mistakes. You get those people who are very indecisive. And I can recall, even for myself, there was a time where I just didn't want to make a decision. I didn't want to make a decision because I felt as if I made this decision, is it going to be right? How are people going to view that decision? You know, is it going to be a good decision or a bad decision? I don't trust myself enough to make the right decision, right? So that can definitely cause you to be an indecisive person. Perfectionism can cause you to be indecisive. It can cause you to just not feel, and you put high standards on yourself and others. So no one, you and no one else, can meet your standards. So that's really not a good way to live. Perfectionism can incite fear. Because again, I talked about not wanting to make a mistake, not wanting to even try new things for the fear of it not going the way that you feel that it should go, right? Perfectionism is prevalent in individuals who have experienced childhood trauma. It particularly in children whose parents were, if their caregivers withheld love and affection. So think about some of our children today. Think about some children that you're around. You know, how are they responding to different things? Are they hard on themselves? Are they not wanting to make decisions? Is it just too painful? Maybe they could be dealing with some issues of, lack of love, lack of affection. So thinking about that. So repeated exposure. Hey, Unc, how are you? Thank you for joining me this evening. Welcome to Tea Talks. Repeated exposure to trauma often involves living in an environment where all of your actions are monitored and scrutinized. I'm going to repeat that. Perfectionism can come from living in an environment where all of your actions are closely monitored or scrutinized. And your abuser, the person who is causing this trauma, that can make you feel as if you have to do everything right. Like, I can't get this wrong. I have to be what this person has called me to be. And that gets into the other side of people pleasing. You know, I want to please people. I want to do things right for people, because if I make a mistake, I may be scrutinized. If I make a mistake, I may be in danger. So perfectionism is driven by, one cause is childhood trauma. I talked about a couple weeks ago that the other cause could be bullying, right? You know, people who have been bullied in their younger years, they grow up with this mentality that no one's going to bully me now. I'm going to do everything perfect, so I'm going to show them. You know, I'm going to show them that I can be this person, this better person, this great person. Again, putting pressure on you, putting a lot of pressure on you to live up to this standard that may be unreachable. and unattainable, or leave you in a position where you're completely drained. Completely drained. So let's understand that perfectionism is not considered a mental disorder. It's a component of some mental disorders. Let's think. What about people who have obsessive compulsive disorder? Constantly hand washing, constantly going back and forth to check and see if the door is locked, constantly trying to say, no, let me change this, sending out messages, but constantly erasing and trying to go back. So obsessive compulsive disorder and personality disorder can directly come from a person being a perfectionist. So perfectionism can drive those compulsive disorders, but it is not in itself a mental health disorder. It is a coping mechanism for trauma. Living up to unrealistic expectations. Absolutely, pressure you put on yourself to measure up. Exactly, pressure to put on yourself to be this person that you feel everybody else wants you to be, or this person that makes you feel as if you have arrived. But the difference between a perfectionist and someone who wants to excel, there's nothing wrong with wanting to excel and wanting to do well. But a person who is stuck in a perfectionism mind state literally chases after one thing after another after another. I have to get certification after another. I have to get degree after another. If I stop, then that means I'm not good enough. I'm not measuring up. But definitely looking at what type of pressure we are putting on ourselves to measure up, right? Those unrealistic expectations and internal ideas. And those responses are often motivated by fear, low self-esteem, right? Excessive worry and how others perceive you. As a person, as a recovering person who always worried about what other people thought about me, right? I'm recovering from that. It was definitely hard, definitely a challenge, because you're worried about every little detail about you, every little detail about what you can do, every little detail about what you know. And it's always challenged, and usually not by others, but by who? Yourself. We are our biggest critics. We can be our biggest critics. And in that criticism, we are driving ourselves to a point where we're feeling anxious, where we're feeling scared. Yes, all of us want to excel. We want to do good. Especially if you have families, you have people looking up to you. You want to leave a legacy. You want to do great things. And there is nothing wrong with doing great things, but we have to monitor and take our pulse. So I'm going to go through some things that's going to kind of help you kind of take a step back and think a little bit. Am I teetering on perfectionism? So perfectionism behavior could be chronic procrastination. I was the monogamist, the serial procrastinator, always feeling like I can manipulate time. Always feeling like, I'm gonna leave 10 minutes before I got to get to work, even though it takes me 8 minutes to get to work. I know I'll still have 10 minutes to run in and get my work done. If I had an assignment to do, or if I had a paper due. I remember when I was in college, I was in my junior year of college, and I had a 25-page paper due, and I did the paper on body image, and I actually used Barbie as my muse. I had the channel Barbie in. And this paper, of course, when your first day of class, they give you a syllabus, you know exactly what you have to do. But procrastinating me, I waited till the day before to the night before to write my paper. And it was 25 pages. It was the day before we got off for Thanksgiving break. And I literally, when I tell you I did not sleep, I crashed afterwards and was finally able to turn my paper in before I left for break. But I vowed that if I ever had a situation like that again, I would never do that to myself again, because I was in a panic. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get it done. I didn't know. I actually put a lot of stress on my body because I was drinking energy drinks. I was taking, we had this thing in college called no-dos. And no-dos was like the thing, you know, when you had to do a pull all-nighter. I was taking no-dos, and literally when I came down, I crashed so hard. I think I slept for 2 days after that. And it was like no benefit, right? But I always lived my life in this state of procrastination because I felt like if I waited to the last minute, I wouldn't have the opportunity to change anything because I was under pressure. It had to get done. So yeah, procrastination, having problems completing tasks or giving up easy. If something seems like it's going to take you a little bit of time, you kind of shut down. You know, am I shutting down because this is a big task and I know that I need to get it done, right? Being overly cautious and thorough, spending a tremendous amount of time on something that should take you 20 minutes. A tremendous amount of time. We're talking about hours. But something so simple and so quick, a person who is in that perfectionism stage is constantly writing, rewriting, erasing, overthinking, having that mind of overthinking. And I know even with me, I'm still working through some of that overthinking, you know, but spending a long time on something that shouldn't take you but a couple minutes. How about excessively checking things for mistakes? You know, going back and forth, trying to reread it, trying to re-understand, you know, just being obsessive and doing it excessively. Constantly trying to improve things by redoing them, whether it's your work. And I laugh because and I don't even know if this is like residue, but whenever I'm writing something and say I make a mistake, I ball the paper up and start all over. Because I don't want a mistake on my paper. So all of that could be the residue from this ideal of needing to be perfect, right? Agonizing over small details. What am I going to cook for dinner? What movie are we going to go see? What do I want to eat for dinner? You know, what those small little things, we perfectionists agonize over those things. And instead of making a decision, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to make a decision. Make an elaborate to-do list. Listen. I was the to-do list person every day. 10 items on my list, and as I'm doing it, I was checking it off. And if I didn't complete everything on that list, I felt like I had failed. Now, talk about some perfectionism. That is definitely a sign that you may be crossing over into that area. Avoiding trying new things for fear of making mistakes. You know, we know that fear holds us back from a lot of things. Fear can stop you from moving. It immobilizes you because you're so afraid to do anything because you don't want to get it wrong. You don't want to be ridiculed. You don't want people to look at you a certain way. So thinking about some of those things that I said, and again, that list is not exhaustive. There are a few more things that we can think about when it comes to perfectionism. Just think about for a minute, have any of you guys ever experienced some of those things or have been in those situations where you felt like you couldn't move or you were afraid to make a decision, you know? And so learning how to overcome that is key. How do we overcome being a perfectionist? Thank you all again for joining me on Tea Talks. We are talking about perfectionism on today and how perfectionism is a coping mechanism for trauma. It's a coping mechanism for those adversities that we've experienced in our lives. So again, thank you for joining me. This is every Wednesday at 7 p.m. I am your certified trauma support specialist. We just kind of went over some things of how to recognize perfectionism when you see it. Please like and share. Tag someone in this broadcast who you feel need to hear this. But we are trying to figure out, how do we get better? How do we get that piece of us back? Everything that has been taken from us, and reclaim our lives. You know, trauma, again, it gives nothing. It takes everything. It puts you in a different mindset of how you view the world and how you view other people. And so, as we're talking about overcoming perfectionism, I'm going to give you some tools on how you can do that. First of all, we have to be realistic. You know, it's so important for us to be realistic about ourselves and what we're doing and about what's going on in life. The first thing is you have to realize that nobody is perfect. You know, I used to I had this one particular entertainer that I just gloated over, you know, felt like that entertainer could do no wrong. I just loved their art, you know, and again, I put that person in a place of excellence. I felt like, you know, they couldn't do anything wrong. And then, you know, being in the limelight as an entertainer, everything comes out in the wash, right? Everything comes out. And so finding out things about this person, you know, can kind of damage my image. And so it began to help me grow and understand that nobody is perfect, no matter what they look like on the outside, no matter how they dress it up. We all have those things inside of us that need to be worked on. And so understanding that will help us get grounded in how we feel about us and not trying to be this person that we think people want us to be. Even telling yourself, all I can do is my best. This is my best. I'm going to take what I know. I'm going to take my skills. I'm going to take my talents. I'm going to do this task. And the only thing I can do is my best. You know, and my best should be good enough. My best, if I put my all into it and I give 100% to this, my best is good enough. Okay? All I can do is my best. Saying those things over and over and over whenever you're charged with a task. Making a mistake does not mean that you're stupid or a failure. It only means that you're human. Making a mistake does not mean you're stupid or a failure. It means that you are human. Understanding that you are a human being. It's okay not to be pleasant all the time, right? You know, we all have those days that are challenging. We all have those days where, you know what, I'm doing good, I have joy, but I'm just not feeling this adulting thing right now. I'm just not feeling this right now. You know, it could be, you know, a lot of things trigger us too. You know, you think about different things that trigger you. It could be the weather. It could be, you know, just the fact of you're waking up and thinking, I have all of these things to do. And that could make you kind of feel like, okay, I'm going to get through this day, but I'm just not like feeling like, wow, you know. So not putting a lot of pressure on yourself to, again, show up and be this person that people want you to be. I'm going to say that. You be the person that God has called you to be, the person that, you know, you're supposed to be, but not the person. You don't have to be the person that people want you to be. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure to put on you and people, right? It's okay if people don't like me. I always say I'm not everybody's cup of tea, right? Not everybody's cup of tea. And that is perfectly fine. No one is liked by everyone. And again, understanding that that person's feelings towards you may be more about them than it is about you. So understanding that, don't take things personal. That goes into that realm, you know, not to take things personal. Everything is not geared towards you. Everything is not personal towards you. We have to take a different perspective on things. We have to take a different view on things. Again, remember, please like and share this broadcast. We are talking about perfectionism, what that looks like, and how we can ultimately deal with overcoming our mentality of having everything to be perfect. Perfectionism, again, is not a mental disorder. Perfectionism is a coping mechanism for someone who has experienced trauma. It's a coping mechanism for those who have experienced adversities in their life. And so we're talking about how we can get through perfectionism. We want to reclaim our lives. We want to be better. We want to be a better version of ourselves. We're always learning and changing. We want to be better, but sometimes there are pieces of us. I love it because I love jigsaw puzzles. For those of you who know, you know. I love jigsaw puzzles, and when you get a jigsaw puzzle out of the box, it's in many different pieces. There's a picture on the front of how it's supposed to look, and you're tasked with putting that picture together. So just like us, we are made up of so many different pieces. There are so many different pieces of us. And when something happens to us, sometimes our pieces get lost. Sometimes our pieces get broken. Sometimes our pieces are missing. And so we have to find out how to go and get those so that we can be whole again. Because if you ever look at a puzzle that's incomplete, if it's missing one or two pieces, it's just not quite right. You can see the picture, but it's just not right with those pieces missing. So we want to reclaim our lives. This is why I get on to talk about how we can recognize those behaviors, that trauma that has come out of trauma, those behaviors that has caused us to respond a certain way, to act a certain way, to view the world a certain way, and then ultimately try to get those things back. So we're talking about, again, perfectionism, right? So that was the first, we talked about tools. Those are some things that we can say to ourselves. So again, how do we look at it in a different perspective? People who have the perfectionism mentality have a hard time seeing things from another person's point of view. They have a hard time seeing it. They often tend to look at things only through their lens, through the lens of what they feel it should be. They don't view another's. They don't worry about how others think about their situation. It's all about how I see the situation, not how you see the situation, right? Cup half full, cup half empty type of deal. You may believe that you're lazy, right? Because you may only exercise 1 hour instead of 2. Constantly measuring yourself up against another person. Learning to look at situations in a different light is definitely key. It can help change some of the way you believe, the way you think. Looking at the big picture. Whatever I'm doing right now, does it really matter? Does it really matter that, I forgot to dot this I on this piece of paper? Does it really matter that I had to draw a line through that word? Does it take away from the big picture? So how are we looking at things, right? What's the worst that could happen? If I misspelled a word in that email, what's the worst that could happen if I forgot to put eggs in the cake? The cake will fall, but again, hey, I'll just start over and do it again. But not allowing those times where your things just don't go right, and being okay with it and having it be a learning experience instead of an experience where you're constantly beating yourself up. We don't want to beat ourselves up. We want to be kind to ourselves. We want to be gentle with ourselves. We want to understand that, again, we are not perfect. Is this going to affect my tomorrow? Right? Thinking about these things. How about next week? What about next year? Am I going to look back on this and it's going to have such a huge impact on me that I'm not going to be able to move forward? Right? So looking at those things, how are you looking at yourself as being perfect? So we want to be aware of our tendencies. First thing we want to do to overcome perfectionism, we want to be aware of our tendencies. When we see ourselves crossing over those lines or being hard on ourselves about the smallest things, how are we viewing that? Being aware of that, saying, you know what? Talking to yourself, okay, you're reading too much into this. This is not a big deal. Let's move on, right? Focusing on the positives. Perfectionists often look at only the negatives. So let's look at things. You're looking at the one thing or two things that wasn't right. Let's look at the 10 things that was right. Changing your perspective. Changing the way you see things. Allow yourself to make mistakes. It's not the end of the world. Set reasonable goals for you. Making sure that you're setting goals that make sense. Not goals that are so beyond your reach that you become overwhelmed and then ultimately shut down, right? So those are a few things how we can overcome perfectionism, right? You don't have to be perfect to be powerful. Perfectionist is all about your perception. We are all human. I know what you went through was traumatizing. I know that, nobody ever felt like you can do it. I know that, you never got the love and support that you needed. I know that nobody ever told you that you were doing a good job. I understand that those things may have bothered you. But you don't have to be perfect to be powerful. Just do your best. Do what you can do. Love on yourself. Be patient with yourself. Be understanding with yourself. Don't try to live up to a standard of other people's view of you. Don't try to be what someone else wants you to be. Follow your path. Understand that you can still make an impact even if you don't dot the I or cross the T, or even if you don't make it, even if you don't make that thing 100% perfect. You don't have to go back and look at it, and you don't have to go back and try to redo it, because what I learned is that no matter how hard you try, there's always going to be someone who has something to say about something. So again, don't live in the box that people put you in. Understand that you still can be a great person. You still are a great person. You don't have to put so much pressure on yourself. You are loved. You are appreciated. So we're going to finish this up next week. It is now 7:31. I want to tell you guys that we meet on here every Wednesday at 7. I may be changing, going to 7:15. I am changing to a different platform, a different podcast platform, but I will definitely keep you guys informed on that. You guys can also go on my website at www.20biosphere20.org. If you want to set up a counseling session with me, I have a 30-minute free counseling session. I also have a T-Talks podcast that's on my website as well. I will be uploading some other shows that I have done also. Thank you guys for joining me on tonight. We want to reclaim our lives. We want to put the pieces of our puzzle together so that we can be a whole picture. Those small things that we never think about could be affecting us in so many ways. But we want to recognize them. We want to understand what they are, and we want to move past them, because we want to be whole. We want to be better. We don't want to allow those things of the past to determine our future, to determine how we move, to have us be fearful or uncertain. We want to be bold. We're supposed to be bold in this world. We're supposed to love who we are. We were made in God's image. God made us perfect in his eyes. And so we have to view and think about ourselves in that way and not be so hard on us. So again, this is T-Talks. I am your certified trauma support specialist. I love you all. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week at 7 o'clock. Bye-bye.